Hello and welcome to this homework video due to give you a bit of feedback which is based on your first assessment of this year, which is around urban challenges, particularly looking at our case study in Lagos. Now before we go and give you the feedback video, what I want to do is to remind you of the things that you need to be doing when you go into the exam, because there are lots of people that I'm not seeing evidence of this from at the moment, okay, and that is to follow your bugs. Remember, you always need to box your command word. Is the question asking you to describe? Is it asking you to what extent? Is it asking you to explain? Underline the things that you think are important and the key words within the question. Go back, read that question again, and then start planning and sequencing your answers. I know it might seem like common sense, but there's a lot of you that are not doing it at the moment, and that's having a big impact on the possible grades that you could achieve. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each question, one question at a time. I'm going to give you some feedback based on that question. You need to look at how well you did in that exam. Look at the marks you got, see if you can work out your own what went wells, your even better ifs, where you're picking up marks and where you're not picking up marks. Now remember, the name of the game is that you get a good GCSE grade at the end of it. So you must make sure that you go back and re-attempt those questions that you didn't quite get right to make sure that you know what you need to do in order to get maximum marks. This video can be stopped, paused, rewound at any time so that you can get a full picture of how well you've done on that assessment. Okay, right, to the paper. Now the first question that you had to do was a skills-based question, okay, and if I zoom in you should be able to see it over here. You had a map and it simply said study figure 1, a map showing the percentage of the population in urban settlements in different parts of the world. Now if I was to go through and to do my bugs, first thing I'd do is I'd box that command word, and the command word that you can see down there is of course describe. Now it's asking you to describe two differences between the percentages of the population living in urban settlements between Africa and South America. Now in order for you to be able to answer that question, you of course need to know a little bit of basic geography, so you need to understand what the differences are within your map of America or South America and Africa. So for those people that are not 100% certain, this is Africa here. Remember, it's not a country, it is a continent with 54 countries in it, and this is South America that we've got down here. Now this particular type of map is a choropleth map. What that means is it uses different coloured shading to represent different things on the map. Now the question is 2 marks and it's simply asking you for 2 differences. So here is my feedback based on this question. Okay, you must describe 2 differences from the map. Now you'll notice I've underlined 2 differences and I've put that they cannot be opposites. Now here are examples of things that you can get for those 3 marks, and lots of you got marks for saying that there is a higher percentage of people living in urban areas in South America. Now that would pick you up a mark, but if you wrote that there is a higher percentage of people living in South America in urban areas but a lower percentage for your second difference in Africa, that still only gets you 1 mark, because all you've done is just said the opposite to what you said in the first place. So please don't describe opposites. Other marks that you could have got is you could have said that there is a bigger variation in the percentage between South America and Africa. So if you look at all of those different countries, the ones that are the highest values in South America, the lowest values, have a bigger difference than in Africa. That would have picked you up marks. And if you'd have said many, less than 40% in Africa, there are many sort of countries that have less than 40% of their population living in urban areas in Africa, but only 1 in South America, that would have got you the other mark. So have a little look. See where you picked up your 1 or 2 marks. If you didn't pick up 2 marks, have a look at my responses now and go back and complete it and make sure that you can pick up that additional mark. Now the next question that you were asked to look at was a question that involved using a graph. So we're using some of those different graphical skills, and you should have a copy of this graph in front of you. Now again, this question was a simple describe style question. You've got the graph that's there. You didn't need to follow our steps for success that we've talked about with graphs for this particular question. All you needed to make sure that you could do was shade 2 circles, and 2 circles only. Anyone that circled more than 2 or shaded more than 2 circles, I'm afraid you're not likely to pick up the marks, okay? Now the correct answers to that question were circle B and circle D, and if you have a little look back at your map, you should be able, or your graph, sorry, you should be able to work out the reasons why that was. So B said the urban population grew more rapidly than the rural population between 1950 and 2000. And if we have a little look at here, okay, I told you which ones were your colours when it came to an exam. You can clearly pick out the patterns that you can see on that particular graph. So here we've got our urban population, and from 1950 it is increasing more rapidly than the rural population that you can see down there. Okay, nice and simple. Now D was the other correct answer, which says the urban population increased by over 2,000 million between 1950 and 2010. So all you needed to do was to do a quick bit of maths. Okay, go through the list of the things that you've got, tick them off one at a time as to whether or not they are true or whether or not they are false. Okay, so if you didn't get those marks, please shade in the correct ones on your graph now, but more importantly, make sure that you look back at that graph so that you understand where you're picking up those marks and where those marks are coming from. Now the next question, we get onto our longer answer questions. Now there is a command word in this next question that is really, really important that you get to grips with, because it's being able to do these command words that allows you to access those grade 8s and those grade 9s. So if I zoom in on this question that you can see up there, it says, to what extent? So if I'm boxing my command word, that's the command word that I'm going to box. Do urban areas in lower income countries, so LICs, or newly emerging economies, NEEs or NEEs, provide social and economic opportunities for people. Now I talked about bugs a little bit earlier on, okay, and I'm going to show you that now using this paper that we've got in front of you. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to box my command word, and my command word is to what extent, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. Then I'm going to start to underline the things that I think are important. So I've put urban areas, so I know I'm talking about cities, and when I go into an exam I might even annotate that, and I might say, well, that means cities. In lower income countries, so LICs, okay, or NEEs, newly emerging economies. Now I know that we haven't done a case study on these, so automatically I'm thinking lower income countries, and I'm thinking of what my case study was, and my case study was Nigeria, and more importantly was Lagos. Okay, so I'm going to put Nigeria and Lagos there. The other thing that I'm going to underline are social and economic opportunities, because if I only talk about one of those, I'm not going to be able to pick up any marks when it comes to the exam. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out, and I'm just going to show you how people did on that particular question. Okay, now the biggest mistake that people made was that you're still not getting that command word, and the command word is to what extent. And if something is to what extent, it's asking you to evaluate, so it's got to have two sides to an argument. Now in the case of this question, you need to argue that there are both social and economic opportunities and challenges, because if you only give one side of the argument, you can't pick up any marks. Remember, we're looking at an LIC, so immediately you're thinking Nigeria and Lagos, and you need to talk about social and economic opportunities and challenges. If you only talk about one of them, then that caps your levels at around about level 2. And we'll have a look at the mark scheme in a second so that you can see where you pick those up. So to summarise, okay, evaluate means that you need to be able to give both sides to an argument. In the case of this question, that means talking about opportunities and challenges that are associated with urban areas. Now, a quick reminder, social is talking about healthcare and education. It's not talking about making friends. Lots of you wrote down that living in an urban area is a social benefit because people can make friends, okay? As lovely and as nice as that sounds, it's not going to get you marked when it comes to an exam. Now, the mark scheme looks a little something like this. So you will notice that it's got 3 levels to it. So you've got level 1, you've got level 2, and you've got level 3. Now we need to be aiming for level 3, which is detailed on our mark scheme. Now you will notice that there is also these AOs, and AO is the assessment objective, and we're going to talk about these an awful lot over the course of the next 2 years. AO1 is all about your knowledge. AO2 is about how you apply your case study, and AO3 is all about your ability to be able to evaluate. Now if we have a look at the mark scheme, you can see that in order to hit level 3, you need to hit AO3, which means that you need to be able to evaluate, and that evaluation means that you need to give both sides of the argument. What are the challenges and what are the opportunities? Now the final question was another to what extent question. So if we're boxing those command words, you needed to make sure that to what extent was the command word that you boxed. Now these 9-mark responses are going to make a massive difference to your end result or your end grade. If you can nail these 9-mark questions, you can do really, really well when it comes to the exam. So remember, evaluate means two sides to an argument. You need to use a case study, and the question asked you about some of the different ways that we can improve. So it said, to what extent can urban planning improve the quality of life for people in LICs? So again, boxing to what extent? I'm talking about urban planning and I'm talking about improvement. Well, what we looked at were two things really. We looked at the Makoko floating school and how that could be a potential prototype for sustainable living within the slums. We also looked at traffic management schemes. You need to talk about the opportunities. So the Makoko floating school, loads of fantastic opportunities to make it sustainable, but you also need to talk about the pitfalls and how there might be some challenges. And you will know that the Makoko floating school unfortunately has been knocked down, okay, and it's been destroyed. So those sorts of things will be things that you can get into your answers and your responses. Now the mark scheme, similar to the 6 mark, is also on a 3-leveled or 3-tiered level mark, and you can see that this time, rather than having AO1 and 2 and 3 at different points on the mark scheme, all 9-mark questions have your basic answers, and you'll have AO1, AO2, AO3, clear AO1, AO2, AO3, and detailed AO1, AO2, AO3. Now when I'm marking your paper, what I do is I mark down the side of the margin AO1, 2 and 3, and then I decide what level it's in. Okay, so if you demonstrate limited knowledge, I'm going to mark it AO1. Okay, I'm going to mark it level 1 for AO1, and then we start to make our grades and our levels from that. So make sure that you are aware of what these assessment objectives mean, and make sure that you are evaluating properly and using specific pieces of information from case studies. And then finally, these are the grade boundaries. Now the grade boundaries are really harsh, and they're harsh because I want you to try and push yourself to those upper grades. The paper was out of 22, so in order to get a grade 9, which is, remember, the top 2 to 5% of people in the country, you needed 20 marks, so you can only drop 2 marks in order to get that grade 9. Okay, so don't be too disappointed with the grade that you've got. Think about what it is that you need to do to improve, and then hopefully we can start to achieve these grades as those different exam or different grade and exam techniques start to improve over the course of the next couple of years. Now remember, if you're still unsure of what you did well, what you need to do in order to improve, come and see your teacher. Your teacher can help you and support you, sit down with you, explain where you've picked up your marks and where you haven't. Right, if you haven't done so already, now go away and recomplete that paper and make sure that you're nailing all the marks that you need in order to achieve your target grade. See you in lesson.